Welcome, everyone, and happy Thursday. It is noon Eastern time here on the East Coast in the booming metropolis known as Ambler, Pennsylvania, just outside Philadelphia, PA. And you know what that means? It is time for your favorite show on the internet, a little show I like to call Talent Experience Live. It covers everything that you need to know in talent acquisition, talent management, recruiting, human resources as a whole. And today, fraud detection, one of the hottest topics in the HR space at the moment. But before we get into that, of course, we have to do some housekeeping. Talent Experience Live is proudly brought to you by the good folks here at Phenom, whose purpose is to help 1 billion find the right work. That is why we have this fantastic program on a weekly basis, why we also have our thought leadership podcast with Cliff Yurkowitz called Unusual Attitudes on a monthly cadence, and also why we have a slew of fantastic blogs, events, I Am Phenom India, everything else under the sun. So if any of that interests you at all, run, don't walk over to phenom.com, where, of course, you will find out about our intelligent talent experience platform, which helps candidates find the right fit faster, employees evolve in their current roles and beyond, recruiters achieve next level productivity and efficiency, and managers get to build better teams through data analytics and automation. You can find all that at phenom.com. But I know you're not going to go there right now because we have a fantastic episode that we are talking today. Today, we are talking about fraud detection and how authenticity matters. I think we've all seen the TikToks, the LinkedIn posts. Generative AI is here, and it is here to stay. Not only are we using it on a daily basis for our own personal jobs, but also candidates are beginning to use it for resumes, for all sorts of things. And this was a trick that a lot of influencers talked about, 6, 7, 8 months ago, where candidates were optimizing their resumes to trick ATS systems and things like that. Fast forward to how far generative AI has come, and candidates are using it in real time. They're using it in interview processes. So today I am joined by Sebastian Niewöhner of our product team here. He's actually the Senior Director of Product Management overseeing this fraud detection product. And he's going to share how we launched just a few short weeks ago the first ever fraud detection in the HR tech space, and why it is truly unique, that this is not a one-size-fits-all solution, that there is a lot of ethics and data and all sorts of information that goes into not just making this a successful piece of technology, but ensuring that it isn't biased, that it isn't making the decision for recruiters, and truly just offering up signals to the talent acquisition teams to say, hey, something doesn't seem right here. So without any further hesitation, I could talk about this for hours, and Sebastian and I have a wonderful conversation about it. But without any further hesitation, here is Sebastian. Welcome to the program. Welcome to the program, Sebastian. It is nice to have you. We have an exciting topic today. I know I teased at the top of the program. We announced this at I Am Phenom, and we've recently released a blog that got a lot of conversation on social media. This marketing term of fraud detection seems to be really top of mind with some of the scarier stories that are coming out around generative AI. I want to ask you first and foremost, I know we say fraud detection, but obviously that's a little bit of a marketing term. This is, more of an integrity check. We are not dismissing anyone or anything along those lines. So let's get that out of the way. But I do want to ask you, why is it such an urgent challenge in talent acquisition today? I think AI tools have been around for quite a while. Why are we now beginning to have this top of mind of candidates are cheating, right? We've always had resume coaches and interview prep and things like that. What makes this so different?
Yeah, I think the big challenge that we see today is these tools get better and better and better. And when I talk and we talk to customers, we actually realized, or they told us that 3 out of 4 of their interviewers actually said in the last 6 months they have detected or they have seen suspicious behavior of candidates either potentially using GPT in the background, reading of a script, sometimes even switching roles between interviews. So we had even candidates where in the first interview it was a different person in the second interview. So cheating there's various different ways of cheating, but I think the rise of AI tools, all of them becoming a lot better, is a problem. Then secondly, of course, we are primarily doing remote interviews via video, via audio. So it's also a lot easier to cheat, right? And the sheer volume of candidates that are currently applying. So it's more like an employer market right now. Everybody needs to stand out in some way, right? And it's a little bit, candidates know probably the other applicants are all cheating. So I have to, or like using LLMs to get better, I would say, not cheating, but using LLMs to be a better candidate. So it's kind of even that that internal like discussion. Do I have to do it as well? And a lot of candidates, I think, using it to prepare, and some are also using it to kind of get the unfair advantage within an interview. Exactly.
Of the situation, 100%. And I just to clarify, I don't think that this is a new issue, really, like candidates trying to find loopholes. I remember back in my talent acquisition days, I've been bait and switched before, Sebastian, where I would think that I was going to interview someone, and someone who did not look like that person showed up to the interview. And, you know, as a recruiter or a talent acquisition professional, you kind of have to keep your wits about you, right? And understand that that may happen. It's on the rise, right? It's the wild, wild west with generative AI. I think all of us are learning how to use it on a regular basis, how we can streamline, you know, our day-to-day work, to be quite frank about it. What is sort of use cases are being identified the most that candidates are trying to get a competitive edge with? I've seen, you know, resumes optimized for certain job descriptions to try and trick applicant tracking systems or things like that. What are, you know, companies and professionals that you're talking with really running into the most because of generative AI?
So I think the fake job applications, I wouldn't call it necessarily fake, but the enhanced job application, I think is the number one aspect, right? Where I think probably 80% plus of all the candidates are using GPT to enhance their resume and actually make it stand out a little bit more. But I think that's only one side of the equation. I think where it's far more, where more candidates are really leveraging LLMs and GPT in the process is to within interviews, making sure they provide the perfect response. So we have all seen these TikTok videos where there's a small iPhone in front of the computer camera, right? And the candidate is literally reading off the script. I think there was the other example from like a coding interview where the entire code challenge is just done by the AI. And that's something where it becomes harder and harder for the other side to detect if someone is using that. And that's what when we talk to the customers, it's like they always have the impression or that some candidates are cheating, but it's so hard to really detect this, especially if this one interviewer only has this short moment of time where they actually have to still do a good job in the interview. And on the other side, like figure out, is this candidate really saying everything that they know, or is there something else running in the background?
Yeah, if you're reading from a script, you're no longer a job applicant. You're a paid actor. At that point, you are trying to pretend to be something you aren't, which I think is where, you know, the concern from you know, organizations and talent acquisition professionals is coming. We all understand that you're going to interview prep with generative AI. You're going to try and put your best self forward in the practice, but simply answering questions that come off that are asked of you and reading from a script to answer them is going to be a little bit problematic. Candidates have always prepared. They've always taken notes beforehand. They've always researched organizations. That's always been encouraged, but it's truly giving off the impression that you are something that you aren't, that I think is where these challenges arise. Now, we announced this at I Am Phenom, and I was very excited about it to see it live in action. We described it as, you know, the first of its kind, and being first is wonderful, Sebastian. But I want to know, as other organizations begin to, you know, sort of figure out solutions to this challenge, what makes our fraud detection or assistance truly unique in the industry?
And I can certainly copy that. After we presented this at I'm Phenom on stage, I think I had like 20 plus customer conversations the hours after. And I think we at Phenom, right, we look at the hiring process end to end. Once a candidate applies at the organization, they are in the system. We have our screening solutions. We have the scheduling and the interviewing solution. And that's what makes it truly a unique agent that is out there in the market. Because we have all the different data points from the very beginning, application, to the screening interview, the video audio interview that the candidate is taking, to the first, second, third round interview that is then captured, automatically recorded and captured in the system. And as I mentioned, right, it's very hard sometimes to detect in a single interview if someone is cheating or not. It might just be a bad response, or it's the candidate is keeping something at a very high level. But the power of Phenom is that we have all the data points and we can detect and compare candidate responses and candidates' behavior across interviews. So if the communication style in interview 1 is a very different one in interview 2, there might be something off. And that's why we look at this as an integrity check. It's not that we can clearly say someone is cheating. Maybe they trained a lot in the meantime, right? But there's certainly something off that only we can detect because we have all the data points and can provide these insights to the different interviewers that are part of the process.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it goes right in line with what we've always talked about here at Phenom is that holistic approach, right? You can build a fancy career site, but if you send someone to a poor experience after that, it's not going to have the same effect as creating that holistic and a truly seamless experience throughout. And it sounds like you're describing the same thing here, is being able to piece all of that information together and truly get a bird's eye view is not going to discount or remove any candidate from the process, but simply give you the red flags like a fit score would to say, hey, let's take a closer look. Let's double click in, to use that cliche. I hate saying that, but I think it's the perfect description here. I want to ask you, without giving away our secret sauce, because obviously it has a lot to do with the data that we're able to gather. I've seen articles online that college professors are the dead giveaway for if someone uses ChatGPT is if there's an M dash. They say college students never use M dashes when writing papers, but if it's there, that means that they had some assistance that wasn't their own. My content team is going to hate that because they love using M dashes. It's littered throughout all of our blogs, and I promise they're not using generative AI to write things, maybe proofread, but not to write them. What is our technology looking at it when it comes to a candidate's profile to maybe see if something is inauthentic?
So we look at 3 different aspects when we talk about identity or integrity validation and integrity checks. So the first one is really, and I was on a call last Friday where the HR leader told me, like, they just recently had an interview where the candidate that actually showed up to the first day was not the one that was part of the interview process itself, right? Which is mind-blowing. Like, how can a candidate even be that bold to do that? Well, it's a very big problem for customers now. So the first one is really the identity validation, to really make sure we double check based on voice and video comparison, is the same candidate participating in all stages of the interview process, because customers are using our video interview solution for like asynchronous interviews, and all the actual like face-to-face interviews are also recorded. So that's kind of the first one, identity validation. The second one is LLM usage, or we call it more, we talk about more in the sense of authenticity and performance checks. So is anyone having very long delays in the responses? Is there an overuse of buzzwords? Are some of the responses very impersonal, so they don't really go deep and provide good examples? And again, this does not necessarily mean that they are using GPT. Maybe it's just a bad response of the candidate, or they take a lot of time to think, right? But it's an indication, a signal that something might be off. And especially if we look at it across interviews, these patterns can be detected. And the third one is really inconsistency. Is the same candidate, or is the candidate answering the question the same way across multiple interview rounds? A perfect example is a sales executive who might state in the first interview or in the resume that I had a big success in my last company, but then in interview number 3, the successes kind of reduced by 50%. So there might be these aspects that are very important to show, to provide these signals to the hiring team where something might be off, and where I don't like to call it like someone is using LLMs, because it's not only about LLMs. It's more like, is the candidate really a consistent, communicating in a consistent way? And are there any potential signals that might indicate that this might not be the perfect fit for this specific type of role?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I am going to make I think a bold prediction here. I anticipate that we're going to see a lot more kind of, I don't want to call them gotcha questions. That's the wrong word, but those kind of questions that don't make sense in an interview process. If you
Yeah.
were a reptile, what reptile would you be, right? That's not something that I think individuals will lean on an LLM for. They'll be able to answer that themselves. And
Yeah.
piecing that data together where, oh, it took them half a second to answer this question, while this other one, it, took some time to load, if you will, is going to be something that recruiters are going to be able to pick up on, as well as the technology, right? Where if they have a
Correct.
funny feeling, the same way we do when we see AI generated video, it's like something seems off about their voices or about how many fingers they have. Remember when that was a thing that AI
Yeah.
was giving everyone 6 fingers? We're going to work hand in hand with the machines to detect these sort of things and provide, the best experience for recruiters and the candidates at the end of the day, so that the right ones are getting the fair shot.
100%. I think the questions will certainly change and be more specific, right?
Mhm.
Or more
Yeah.
unique. That it's you. I think it's important that the interviewers or the companies now want to figure out who is the true person, right?
Yes. Mhm.
And it can be these questions that you mentioned. What we see a lot from customers is they really want to make sure that there's like 2 or 3 follow-up questions
Mhm.
for the entry, because that's also something that if someone is using GPT in the background, it's very hard to get to that personal level and provide very good examples
Yeah.
of the past experience. And another one is also, I think, what we see really from customers asking us over and over and over again: how can we make sure that we have interviewers like asking the same questions in different interview rounds in
Mhm.
slightly different ways to then detect how is the response consistent, or
Yeah.
is it off in a certain way, which
Mhm.
might also indicate that this is not the ideal candidate we are looking for.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something that we as human beings, I think, have always been trained to do, to try and see if someone is truthful, right? And asking some of those basic questions, asking for specific numbers or dates, right, are things that the AI won't be able to know or pick up on,
Correct.
and humans will do it, kind of second nature. Like I remember, I know this isn't an issue in Europe, Sebastian, but I'm going to admit a crime. When I was in college, I used to go to bars, right? And the drinking age is 21 here. And I had a fake ID, and they'd ask me like what my address was or what my birthday was. And I had to memorize that like the back of my hand, because if I delayed for any moment, they'd be like, oh, this is not real. We're going to take it away. So I know that's not a good thing to admit on here, but
But
I think we're going to see that practice applied in a talent acquisition in space. You mentioned before integrating with all of the other tools, screening, interview intelligence, and things like that. How does it truly integrate? Is there a dashboard that folks can kind of look and see all of this information at once? Is it happening behind the scenes? What does that look like for the recruiting professional?
yeah. So all this is centered really around the candidate profile and the application that the candidate submitted, right?
Mhm.
And with every step that the candidate continues in the hiring journey, the system gets smarter, more data points are selected, and then we kind of raise these signals. And due to the fact that with every interview round we have so much more information, whenever something might be off, the hiring manager, the interviewer is directly informed about it and can do that manual check. And that's how it's really integrated. It's all around the application itself. What we're also looking at is to go beyond just a single application. And that's again the power of Phenom, right? Some candidates are not only applying once, they are applying 3, 6 months later for a different role. So then there's even more data to validate and to check against
Yeah.
and identify where something might be off, and the hiring team needs to be informed.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I want to ask you, you can't have a conversation around artificial intelligence without mentioning bias, right? It is in the news on a regular basis. What steps are we taking here at Phenom to ensure that we are not involving bias in any way, shape, or form? I think when you're dealing with humans, every human is biased, right? But how do we kind of put the guardrails on that, where there may be a candidate interviewing for a position where English is a second language, right? So the pause or delay is natural as they try and collect their thoughts. What steps do we take in order to remain fair in all aspects?
So first of all, I think like internally we are like heavily monitoring all the signals that are actually be created, reviewing them even to detect if there's any potential gap in the model and in the system that we have implemented. So that's internally we have very strong measurements to make sure there's not a signal waste if it's not really like above a certain threshold of confidence. So that's the internal side of things, but especially on the user experience for the manager and for the recruiter, these signals are really communicated as a potential, like a warning, and any like the signal has a clear recommendation or a clear explanation of why was this detected as a signal, and the references are clearly indicated. So the hiring manager can directly then look at the different video snippet that we have in the system and check, was the answer really off? Was it really a different statement that they gave? So again, it's not that the system is not detecting this candidate is cheating. It's giving the hiring team or the interviewer more data, more insights to do the manual validation. Is something off here, which is normally completely missed in the process. And that's how we try to really avoid the bias, to really make the human in the loop more effective and just give them the insights to make the decision by themselves.
Yeah. No, I mean, it makes so much sense to have those conversations recorded, because oftentimes they do sort of happen in a vacuum, right? Where the initial recruiter will reach out for that first phone interview or that first video interview. Hiring manager, there's no in between. There's no crossover. Sometimes they aren't recorded, things like that. So it makes sense to connect all of those pieces of the puzzle. Now, when you're developing a tool like this, when you're working with a team, ethical considerations, I'm sure, have to come into play when you're, leveraging video as well as audio and language patterns. What did that conversation look like from an ethical perspective? Were there any concerns raised that went into the finished product?
Yeah, so I think what similar to the response I gave before, it's what we really always consider at Phenom, right? We want to make the human in the loop more efficient and like provide them the tools and the insights to make the final decision. And the same is really the same approach went into the building of the fraud detection agent or the integrity check agent, where we only raise and detect the signals if the system is really certain that it's above a certain threshold and it can be presented to the hiring manager or to the interview, because we need to be very mindful about this. Even if there's like 3 signals based on a candidate profile that are then rejected by the hiring manager, it still creates a little bit of a negative touch. Right. So that's a very important aspect. I think a lot of this is really also how the experience is being built and how it's communicated to the hiring manager and to the interviewer who's running the conversation, to give them the final control, give them all the reasoning, and really make sure if something is done wrongly, they can provide the feedback and the model instantly learns, right? And they can reject this. So after it's rejected, it's completely gone from the candidate profile and no one else will ever see the signal again.
Yeah. No, and that makes sense. And it prepares the next steps in the process, right? I'm sure that if there is that signal that's given during the recruiter phase of the interview, that's, as you mentioned before, that same question can be asked maybe in a different wording with the hiring manager or with the decision maker at the end of the day. And when all things are said and done, I think it's important to have these conversations with candidates to say, hey, we were concerned about this answer. I just want to ask it again, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. That's going to be super, super helpful.
And I think also here, what we see a lot of times from like customers, even on our career side, right? They are giving candidates already the guidance, like how can AI be used in the application process and where should it not be used, right? And I think then the ethical consideration is also very important from a communication perspective. As an example, when we talk about interview intelligence, every candidate is informed upfront. This meeting is being recorded, right? You can provide your consent. The same is happening with the fraud detection piece in similar ways, right? I think being very upfront that we might check for certain signals is very important to give the candidate also the confidence or the transparency that this is happening.
Yeah.
And this will probably already get a lot of candidates stop using it from the first place.
Yeah.
But we already see on many of our career sites, large organizations have this statement now when a candidate applies. How can you use AI in the process, and what is accepted, what is not accepted,
Yeah.
and how do we try to prevent that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think about that from a life perspective. You shouldn't use generative AI to write your wedding vows, Sebastian, right? And this is I joke about that, but this is a commitment that you're making. It's a relationship with an organization. You don't want to start it off on the wrong foot. You want it to be genuine. So that warning is nice. I think they should do that for relationships as well, right? These photos were altered, whatever it may be. Now, obviously, we've rolled it out to beta testing to clients. Has anything surprised you in how teams are using the tool? Any successes, anything along those lines?
So the initial feedback has been great from the customer that we really rolled this out to. And we focused especially on the ones that have all data sets available. What we see from the very first weeks that this is launched after I'm seeing them, that there's for 6% of the applications, there are signals in the process. And over 60 to 70% of those are actually actively confirmed by the recruiters who are watching those. So we get very good feedback that the accuracy is high. And again, the recruiters really understand that this is not a clear indication that someone is cheating. It's giving them so many more insights to do to perform a better hiring process, right? Again, this is also on the other side, if a candidate is only giving responses in a very impersonal way or at a very high level, this signal also helps the interviewer to do a better job in the next interview. So it's a little bit of a combination of training interviewers as well. And that's the feedback that we get. These signals also make sure next interview, I can do better to identify directly if the candidate is able to go deep. And that's kind of interesting feedback. It's not just for stating this candidate is cheating or there's an integrity issue. It's also helping the recruiters, the interviewers to be more aware of the issue and do better in the next rounds.
Yeah, and ask the right questions, right? You can ask what project the individuals have been working on before, and details. How do they work with specific team members or whatever it may be? Those very unique, almost storytelling, I think, questions are going to make the recruiters and talent acquisition folks better interviewers, right? They seem interested. It's not surface level. So this helps everyone. Are there any industries that have really attached themselves to this sort of technology that are, finding it far more useful than maybe others?
No. I would say there's two. I think the biggest demand is really coming from the fintech industry, banks, insurance companies, etc. I think because they are just super risk aware, right? And also we have to understand whenever a fake candidate or a candidate that was cheating in the process and is not really showing their true skills is hired, it's a very, very big financial commitment or a loss that the company has to pay off. Right? Wrong hire being made is like $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 down the river. And I think that's where we see a lot of interest really from the fintech industry. And then on the other side, especially not so much on the American in North America, but more on in the Middle East and in India, where we see a lot of demand when it comes to the high volume roles, where the problem is not so much about candidates upskilling themselves, but more switching roles within the interview. So it's very based on the region, very different problems.
Yeah.
And this is what we heard when we look at customer support, customer service roles that are hired in more on a high volume in India and the Middle East. The problem that candidates are sending a friend, sending a family member is a big one. And these are kind of the two interesting industries, or the industries with the biggest demand right now.
Absolutely. That makes sense. I mean, you mentioned fintech and banking. I think the word fraud as a whole is something that entire industry wants to stay away from. So it makes sense that they would immediately, be interested in that and trying to, keep their ship as smooth as possible. And also the, kind of personality switching or having folks interview is, as I mentioned before, something that has always happened across industries. So it makes sense that those sort of regions would be interested. I know that this is just the beginning. What are you excited for, in the future when it comes to these signals to maybe identify some early inaccuracies?
Yeah. So as you said, it's the beginning. Like we get so much good feedback from all the customers. So we are heavily advancing what we have right now and incorporate all this. So that's where we at Phenom are very strong, working with our customers to make it a perfect solution for them. And then what we already see and what will be next is certainly also helping on the fake application side of things, right? Like how do you top of the funnel identify? It combines with the fit score that we already have, but how can we enhance this to detect where is an application potentially just created or heavily fine-tuned by an LLM, or there's just so like a bulk application sent by a candidate to 10, 15 jobs at the company. So that's certainly one thing. Then, of course, real-time insights during the interview. So in an ideal world, at some point, the interviewer doesn't need to wait post-interview to get all the signals and information. But what we already have in an initial state is the real-time insight that I can directly get information, go deep, ask a follow-up question, check with the candidate, and then the initial interview itself is even more efficient. And then, of course, we at Phenom have the onboarding solution as well. And candidate, like once the hiring decision is made, the hiring decision is made, right? But it's important to also see throughout the first couple of weeks is what has been discussed and what the candidate has been shared in the interview process. Do they really stand up to that benchmark? Is something where we will also expand the data sets and the analysis of the data sets, not from only the hiring perspective, but also moving forward or into the onboarding process where potential issues can then also be flagged. And the decision that this is not the right candidate is made early in the process and not just 5 months in or a couple of days before the probation period is over.
100%. I think we all understand that candidates will always oversell themselves a bit, right? But there is a fine line between have you oversold yourself or have you blatantly told us something that isn't truthful. And that first 30, 60, 90 days are the temperature checks. It would be nice to leverage technology at that point to check your feelings, right? To see that or perhaps find something that maybe you have missed. So zoning out, last question that I have for you, Sebastian. I want to thank you so much for joining. How does this overall fit into the broader vision for agentic AI? Obviously, this is just a small piece, as you mentioned, but we're going to continue down the path of the future of intelligent hiring, how ethics plays into that role. How does this all fit into Phenom's broad vision?
Yeah, you said it. Like the fraud agent, the integrity check agent is a small puzzle piece in the broader vision. We already have the voice screening agent, we have the intake agent, we have the fraud agent, we have the scheduling agent. And what we are really looking at in terms of the entire hiring process, how do we increase the efficiency on the productivity of recruiters by 10x by using agents and using a combination of agents in a very natural and a day-to-day basis. And that's where we are looking into really expanding those landscapes and giving recruiters at some point really the possibility, the opportunity to do things they can't even think about today, all by giving them all their personal assistant that really allows them to do the job that they would like to do and they need to do to find the best candidates, build the candidate relationship, have time to build the relationship. And we are super excited. The first feedback that we get for the different agents is tremendous. And we have a lot of things to come to really make that hiring experience a truly unique one and a highly productive one and efficient one for all stakeholders involved.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it. I think of it as this is a small piece. It's like autonomous driving, right? You're not going to have autonomous driving in a 1997 Volkswagen Beetle, right? It takes the entire experience, the entire fleet of agents working together for this truly to be successful, because it's not just a snap-on tool that we can add to existing talent. You really, in order for it to be ethical and effective, it has to look at the entire puzzle of it all. So I'm excited,
100%.
Sebastian. I can't wait to have you on in the future as we continue to talk through this, as we talk about some of that future state. It's been too long. I know you're a recurring guest, but you were mentioning before the program, almost 3 years. We got to have you on on a 6-month cadence at least.
I think we will. There's a lot of exciting stuff that we are launching from an agent perspective and from a hiring perspective. So excited to be back on very soon.
I know.
And share the LinkedIn community, all the exciting functionality and value that the agents bring to the organizations.
I know. I can't wait. I still remember we talked about video killing the cover letter back in the day. And
exactly.
I remember that. We've made some spot on predictions, Sebastian, but thank you so much. I appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we can't wait to see what else we have down the line when it comes to fraud detection and everything in that space. Thanks again.
Perfect. Thank you, Devin. It was a pleasure, and talk soon.